Hello and welcome to the Jason Sellers Politics Podcast. First episode in a while. Today we have our first recurring guest, who is also our first ever guest. Elliott Payne was on back in October of 2021 as then a city council candidate in Ward 1 of Minneapolis. Now he's the city council member for Ward 1 of Minneapolis. I have a cup in the way. He'll be joining us. It's gonna be more focused on his life as a council member, more so than his campaign, especially because he's unopposed this year. It's a re-election year, 2023. Here we go. I'm gonna admit him right now. Also, a new camera angle for this, just because I'm in between, cleaning my room and stuff, so my desk is kind of full, and I wanted to do straight on like I did for a couple episodes, but this light, you can still see the glare is off. I put the hat on to see if that would work, but didn't. I'm gonna keep the hat on though. So here we go. Elliott Payne, welcome in.
Hello.
Hello, welcome back. You're the first ever guest to appear twice.
Hey, hey. Happy to
Um,
be here.
yeah, happy that you're able to make it. I'm gonna give just a brief introduction, and then I'll let you introduce yourself again. Um, yeah, this is the Jason Sellers Politics Podcast. We're focused on politics, especially local politics around here in Minneapolis, Minnesota, greatest city, I think. And that's all I had for my brief introduction, I guess.
Well, I can take it from there. I'm Elliott Payne. I use he, him pronouns, and I represent Ward 1 on City Council.
Yeah. I think the first time we ever did this, we had only met once or twice, back in October of 2021. Since then, I've been to a few office hours and a few campaign events. And this episode I've been wanting to do for a while. It's going to be more focused on the office work than the campaign. Um, so let's get right into that. You've been in office for about 15, 16 months now. What are some of the accomplishments that you're proud of on the council? Whether it's something that you pioneered or something the council agreed on and got passed. I know with the strong mayor system, things are a lot different than they were just a couple of years ago. But some of those accomplishments.
Yeah. Back when I was running in 2021, I was really wanting to build on work that I had started when I was working in the Office of Performance and Innovation. And at that time, we were very early in the stages of designing and launching the behavioral crisis response. And since I've been in office, that new mental health response has launched. It's been very successful. And I think one of the proudest things I've done to date is uh, passed a budget amendment through our COVID stimulus process to expand the mental health, doubling the number of vans that we have. So I'm really happy how well that's been received so far, and I'm really hopeful for what it looks like when we have that fully built out capability. Aligned with some of that is work I've done around our opiate response and overdose prevention. So I passed a legislative directive early in the term around medication assisted therapy, hoping to build a center where people can start the process of getting help and have this harm reduction approach to it. Hopefully, ultimately building to an overdose prevention center where people can have some oversight over their use and start the process of getting treatment for that. And that was one of those seeds that I planted really early in the term, and I wasn't sure how it would play out. But since that legislative directive passed, we now have started accepting the settlement money, and so now we have this kind of this framework that we can start making that some of those settlement dollars start going to work around our opiate crisis. So I'm really proud of that work. I passed ordinance around improving our air quality. So we did a ban on solvent-based auto body paints. And what I'm really excited about that is it was like a very narrow type of pollutant. There's not that many body shops in the city of Minneapolis, and already a lot of them had converted. But what's really great about it is we have a 4-year phase in, and we have a lot of financial support around it. So we're using our green cost share program so that a lot of these body shops that have to retrofit their equipment to meet the requirements of this ordinance, uh, a huge portion of that is going to be funded by the green cost share program. And if they combine it with some grants from the state, they can even get their entire paint operation modernized to this water-based paint. And it's kind of like a really important framework in that we have to think about how we're going to retrofit a lot of different aspects of society and industry. And I think this was like a really good framework for approaching that and helping to shift some of the cost burden for some of those retrofits. And I'm trying to think of other things. We, in our budget, was really proud to support Councilmember Wansley and her amendment to fund $1 million worth of sprinkler installation in some of our public housing units. That's, I think it's really bad if we don't have those kind of safety systems and that housing. And I helped pass some amendments to our new Civilian Oversight Commission around having a much more balanced process when it comes to the appointments. The original language had a majority of those appointments by the mayor, and one of my amendments was to make it so that there's an appointment per council member with 2 appointments by the mayor. And then I also passed an amendment that prevents licensed peace officers from being on that commission, because I don't think you have true civilian oversight if you can allow current police officers on it. So those are just like a short list of things that I've done in a very short amount of time.
Yeah, just a couple things. One of them's a response to that, but first I just remembered a couple more things I was going to say in the introduction. I live in Ward 1. Obviously, you know that. I never mentioned it so far today. And you can see I got my Northeast Middle School shirt from when I started there hanging up, and proud Northeaster. And then the second thing was you mentioned the opiate response, um,
Mm-hmm.
kind of the protection for that. I remember at one of your office hours, you were talking to someone about a website where it kind of, I don't necessarily remember what the website was, but it was kind of iffy. People were like, does this encourage it? And people, a lot of people would, probably hopefully say that we need these kind of support systems. So if you can recall what that was, just give a brief explanation on that.
I don't remember the website, but it sounds like we might be just talking in general about harm reduction as a strategy. Does that sound right? For any listeners, harm reduction is a method in public health that basically prioritizes the reduction of harm as the first step in treatment. And so you can maybe contrast harm reduction as a approach to abstinence. And so, I think anyone who struggles with addiction or knows anybody struggling with addiction, it's extremely difficult to quit anything cold turkey. It's hard to quit carbs cold turkey, let alone, fentanyl. And so the idea of harm reduction is to say, let's save lives first, right? So one of the biggest issues around the opiate crisis is, things like fentanyl being widely distributed, which is orders of magnitude more potent than heroin or other opiates. And the real danger for overdose happens when you're using alone and you don't have somebody that can, and I'm not even talking about a medical professional
Yeah.
watching you. I'm talking about just a friend
Uh-huh.
that can at least see if you are passing into being in an overdose situation, because if somebody catches it early enough and they have uh, naloxone, they can save your life, right? And so our goal is to save lives, and from there we want to build up to getting you stabilized and off of that addiction. But before we can get you off of that addiction, we need to save your life. And so the harm reduction strategy is around, never use alone, always, have naloxone around. So if you are using, so that you can do an immediate intervention if you witness an overdose. And you layer on these harm reduction steps until you've worked your way up to getting somebody who is managing their addiction. I think one of the things that's really troubling about opiates is even people who are successful in their treatment are often still having to take a long-term I'm trying to remember, methadone is like one of the most common kind of opiate replacements because the receptors are still active. And so you basically have to swap out one opiate for another. So there are people who are sober now that have to still regularly take some of these medications to stay quote unquote clean. So to get people to that level, you have to start with saving their life first. So that's the harm reduction method compared to like an abstinence program or a program that, starts with like this really firm intervention that tries to like isolate you from using the drug, but like the withdrawal symptoms can be dangerous, right? So you have to kind of ramp off of some of these drugs.
Yeah, and like I said, I don't remember. I just remember something about a website. Maybe it was like um a safe needle usage, information
We
site.
might have been talking about an overdose prevention site. Yeah, that's I think
Yeah.
that what we're talking about,
All
or
right.
also known as a safe use site.
All
And
right. Yeah.
that is the issue, is that people are worried that that would encourage use, but really what it is it gets you around medical professionals. Make sure that if you are going to use, you're using a clean needle, you're not reusing needles. You have, a nurse that can keep an eye on you to make sure that you're not overdosing, and ultimately start getting you help. So if you're using at an overdose prevention center or a safe use site, you're in a clean, supervised environment as opposed to in an alley or an encampment or a bus shelter where you might be alone and you might be at risk of overdosing, or you might be at risk of additional harms because of just the lack of safety in that setting. So that's what we were talking about.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Um, so with those accomplishments you mentioned, obviously there's a lot of work in between. So this is probably hard to do because it's a busy job, but like a brief summary of like daily life as a council member, whether it's like any meetings that are recurring every week, every day, every other week, every month, anything that's kind of regular or anything that's regularly irregular.
Yeah, no, I think the best starting point to answer that question is the formal council calendar, and it's broken down into these 2 week cycles. And so every 2 weeks, there's a sequence of meetings that are consistent week after week. So week one of the council cycle has, I'm trying to think of what the sequence is, but uh, business, housing, licensing, inspection, uh, inspection and zoning. So business housing, inspection and zoning. Um, that meets, I believe, on Tuesdays. Public health and safety meets on Wednesdays. Public works and infrastructure is Thursday. And then the next week is the second week of the cycle. POGO meets on Monday, which is like the policy oversight governance committee. And did I say Monday for POGO? Tuesday is committee of the whole, and then full council meets on Thursday. And that's like consistent throughout the year, every 2 weeks. And there's like some ward weeks in there, which is time to either be in the ward meeting with community, or it's just like there's no formal meetings that week and you can manage your time accordingly. But that 2 week cycle is really the core of what the day-to-day life of a council member is. And
Mhm.
then what happens in between those meetings is really where a lot of the work is. And so, we got started a little 5 minutes delayed here today because I was just fielding a lot of constituent calls today. I actually didn't have any formal meetings on my calendar today, so I was just responding to email, making constituent phone calls, and that can take you into a lot of different places. Some of the emails are very simple. I know the answer off the top of my head here. Let me just shoot a reply. Some of them can be really complex requests that you have to reach out to somebody within the administration to get an answer for them. So that can be a lot of kind of figuring out troubleshooting. So it's hard to kind of put like a time amount on it. So one of the things that I've tried to institute as like a lesson in my first year in office was holding Fridays exclusively for constituent responses. So like all throughout the week, you're responding to email and you're making phone calls, but you're kind of pulled in a lot of directions. You might have meetings interspersed throughout there. It's really easy to get behind on the like really basic constituent emails. And so I've made like every Friday is my day to catch up on my voicemails, catch up on my emails, and make sure that I'm closing the loop on any constituent questions or feedback.
Yeah, and then in that daily life or just life as an elected official in general, especially, a specific position like city council member, what are the kind of things that are like deflating or like frustrating and not like
Mm,
obviously there's the tragedies, the police killings, the gun violence, but like I'm talking just like the bureaucratic, the processes, roadblocks, pushbacks that are just you wish you could just snap your fingers and get something passed.
yeah, no, that's a great question. Some of this might be like personal in nature, just given my background. Um, and I'll say this too. I if anybody's following along with city council, I'm pretty passionate about a lot of topics, and I'm in the minority on a lot of those topics. So I take a lot of votes I'm on the losing side of around issues that are really important to me. And you would think that my answer to your question would be around that dynamic,
Hmm.
and it's actually not. Like I actually see what my role is in making sure that I'm pushing my values forward and my principles forward, and I'm hoping that I'm reflecting our constituents and pushing those values and principles forward. And I recognize that it is a long game in terms of, you know, our capacity to persuade and win the debate on these issues, and that we're not going to win every debate. That's not the frustrating part. The frustrating part is like I'm a very process oriented person. Like I spent a lot of my career in operations in various ways, whether literally in like factories and supply chain warehouse operations or in like digital enterprise software operations. So I'm like a very kind of systems and process oriented person. And the city just doesn't have strong systems and processes in place, particularly for how the public engages with the enterprise. And so what you'll hear a lot when you are around city people and city speak is the talk of the enterprise. And the enterprise is basically city hall and the bureaucracy of that and the people and the staff within that, as opposed to the city, which is like the geographic boundaries of the city or the culture of the city. So the enterprise is like um, what I'm talking about when I share these perspectives. And I would say one of the most frustrating things is still right now to this day, uh, the way that I get answers for my constituents is I have to send an email to, I have to guess at the right department head and then send an email to that department head. And I'm getting into more of like a flow with this on who the right people are to reach out on what issues, because, by the 100th phone call about a pothole or a 100th call about, a sidewalk not getting cleared, you know exactly who to talk to. But I think it's a little bit frustrating that we don't have more of a kind of standard process and workflow around resolving constituent issues on a day-to-day basis. And a lot of I think what people maybe don't understand, and this has made um, this is an even stronger issue now under the new government structure. But as a council member, I can't tell anybody what to do. I have very limited authority when it comes to, the brass tacks of getting somebody's problem solved. Uh, what I have to do is send an email request, or oftentimes I just submit a 311 request on behalf of a constituent. And then for me, and this might be just a personal thing for me because I'm a very kind of like hands-on, I like to get things done person. Um, the council member role is not a hands-on role in that way. It is somebody else's responsibility to get a pothole filled in, to resolve an issue with a property line, to manage our unhoused community. I have kind of the bully pulpit of the dais on city council. I have the platform of my voice, especially, I think when a council member says something that carries differently than a day-to-day citizen of the city. But one of my biggest frustrations is that I am 100% dependent on the enterprise to resolve issues, and we don't always have really clear processes and workflows for how any citizen or resident of Minneapolis can plug into the enterprise, let alone me as an elected person.
Yeah, I think, um, I don't want to speak on behalf of a lot of people, but I think I know from my current internship that there are people who think you can call and speak directly to whomever, and they'll be like, "Oh yeah, I'll do that right now." And um, it's not just that just the ability, but it's also the amount of requests. Um,
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. The volume of it is it's very tricky to keep up with as a single individual. I'm very fortunate to have two full-time staff in my office that help assist with that. And, you know, and I also don't want to underplay the fact that there is a decent amount of responsiveness. I've gotten a lot of support by Public Works, and as you can imagine, a lot of the volume has been Public Works related issues around snow plowing, potholes, road
mhm.
conditions, um, obstructions, and stuff like that. And Public Works has been really responsive, and that's partly because we've kind of gotten into our workflow of have a direct email to the deputy for our public works director, and I channel everything through her. And sometimes I CC some other people if I think it's relevant, but like we've just kind of formalized it where I mostly channel most of my requests through our deputy. But it's kind of like I said, it's kind of ad hoc and it's not that structured. And as a person who's designed like very structured processes and workflows in like large enterprises professionally, it just kind of grates at me that we're just sending emails.
Yeah. So I only have one more question that's related to the work, and it's a little more campaign related. From what you've done, kind of summarizing your accomplishments, what will be the message? Whether it's from this year, from your last campaign, what's the message you're going to emphasize during this election, even if you are unopposed and you stay unopposed? Um, whether it's a piece of legislation, uh, general personal values, or anything in between.
Let's finish what we started. 2021, 2020, these were such contentious years in our city. And there was so much urgency to change the status quo. And I think the consequences of the status quo were laid bare in the murder of George Floyd. And it was a radicalizing moment for a lot of people. And I think the level of engagement was through the roof. I don't think local elections are historically as contentious as that. I think really starting in 2017 is when I think a lot of Minneapolitans started to pay really close attention to local elections. But uh, that was like in response to the Trump administration and some of the, horrible things around the Muslim ban, child separation. I mean, I think people were feeling quite helpless and they looked to their local elected offices as a way of like channeling some of that hopelessness into something more productive. And I think that we had a really productive city council under the last term. Uh, and the murder of George Floyd just kind of amplified that engagement in a really profound way. But as we fast forward to 2023 and, the streets are cleaned up, um, there's, a lot of settlements that have happened as a result of the conduct of the police. Those trickle in every single council meeting, almost every other week, according to that 2-week council cycle. We have a closed session where we're settling these cases of, police brutality, right? I get to see that still. I think the general public has kind of, I don't want to say moved on, but like life has continued to go on. When I first announced my campaign, we didn't have vaccines for COVID yet. My first time leaving the house for anything other than grocery shopping was to knock doors. Um, and it's like, as the vaccines have, been widely distributed, as people have gotten back to what approximates normal living pre-COVID, there's been this distance between the righteous energy that existed in 2020 and now. And I think we need to finish what we started, because there was a reason that righteous energy was channeled throughout the city. And I think that we can't lose sight of that. And we have to make sure that we follow through on what we ran on in 2021, or at least that I follow through on what I ran on in 2021. And that was really to transform public safety for the better.
Yeah, I think, at least I hope, that there isn't too many people who have kind of, I know you mentioned on your last Wedge Live appearance that question 1 and question 2 were both very significant, and not that
Mm-hmm.
question 3 wasn't. Um, but I hope that there's not a lot of people, but I mean, there definitely could be a lot of people who are discouraged and who said, well, we tried, and you know, the money, all of Minneapolis, all those types are going to keep pushing back. And I think continuing to work, whether it's in a position of office or just as a constituent and as a citizen who wants to help your neighbor, I think keeping that optimism and keeping that determination is obviously very important. So I have 2 questions left, and they're both on the lighthearted side. Um, I am someone who almost completely relies on a car, and
Mm-hmm.
I don't love that about myself. And I know in a lot of my situations it's necessary when I need to go from St. Paul to Uptown in a half hour. But as someone who wants to start biking for transit more, I want to practice biking more, because I'm not in a stage where I can bike to work and not be tired and sweaty for the
Mm-hmm.
next 4 hours. So do you have any recommendations for bike trails, loops, routes, specifically in
Ooh,
Northeast?
yes, I do. Um, One of the things that I started doing every day during lockdown is going on a bike ride.
Mhm.
And that was year round, because I just needed to get out of the house. And because I because of lockdown and not having like a destination to go to, I just started to explore different loops. And so this is a very specific Northeast loop that I really enjoyed, because I live right off of St. Anthony Parkway. So one of my favorite routes, actually, and this would be a thing that I would do over the lunch hour, because I normally wouldn't have any meetings scheduled, is take the Parkway. Uh, we'll just generically say starting at Johnson Street, go up Deming Heights, down and then around the river. And then if you cross the river, you can kind of, there's like some trails that are run along the river
Hmm.
on the north side. You can take that all the way up to 694, cross 694, and then take East River Road all the way back to the Parkway. That's like a really great, like 40-minute. If you have an hour, it's like a really nice, lot of river, a lot of nature trail that is like accessible by Northeast.
Yeah. Don, my grandfather, I think he's recommended that. Um,
Oh,
because
nice.
he works, by Marshall and St. Anthony Parkway. So just going up Marshall, you get to East River Road. And I should have prefaced this by saying I'm not just asking you as a just a recommendation. You are a full-time biker. So
Yeah.
just want to make sure the listeners realize I'm not springing that onto you.
Yeah.
My final question is more of a request than a question. We have two council members that we know won't be back. They're not running for re-election. Andrew Johnson, Ward 12, Lisa Goodman, Ward 7. Just like a parting compliment to each of them. It can be as professional as you want or as personal as you want. My only request, and this is probably more for your sake, is that whatever level of professionalism the compliment is about, to do it on both of them. So neither of them takes
Yeah.
it.
Okay. I really appreciate how thoughtful Andrew is. I don't always agree with his outcomes, but he always has a rationale to how
Mhm.
he's arrived at his decision, and he can always explain it to you in a really transparent way. I think if you were to look up integrity in the dictionary, someone like Andrew would show up there. He's very transparent and honest, and I just always appreciate that about him. And I really appreciate how principled Lisa Goodman is. I again don't always agree with where she arrives, but she's very strong and full-chested about her stances on the issues, and she doesn't waver. And she's very, I think she's very strong from that perspective. And one of the big things for our job is, do we are we leaders who shape the outcomes, or are we representatives who reflect our constituents? And I think that there's always a balance there. And I think that Lisa's done a really good job of figuring that balance out as a leader, because like her other thing that she's also got a really strong reputation for is just like really great constituent services. Like she really understands her ward, and she really leads. So those would be my two compliments.
Yeah, I'm on the email list for all 13, and I've gotten notifications of lunch with Lisa's coming up, and I'm like, oh, maybe I'll sneak down for one of those. Well, yeah, Elliot, thanks for coming. If you have any questions for me or anything, or any last statements you want to say before we kind of close it out, um, yeah, you're welcome to do so.
Yeah, well, depending on when you're publishing this, the DFL convention for Ward 1 is this Saturday, May 6th. Doors open at 9 and gavel at 10. So if you're a delegate, make sure you make it to the convention. I think, I'm unopposed for the DFL endorsement, but it doesn't mean I'll be unopposed for the election. But either way, I think this is a real opportunity for us to build community together and build power together, because I think the more we get people engaged at the grassroots level, the better the policy outcomes that we can expect from our elected leaders. And so it's so important for me to hear from you, especially in that setting of the DFL convention, because it really formalizes our relationship to each other and makes sure that I am being held accountable to the community. So I'll say that. And otherwise, uh, I always am just really grateful about how engaged you are. And you are one of our regulars for our office hours. And it's just like so great to know that there are people that care, because this job can be really stressful and hectic, and you don't know if anybody's paying attention. And it's always great to see that type of engagement and commitment to the process. So thank you for that.
Yeah, always glad to learn and take in information, even if some of it goes over my head and some of it um doesn't. Um, yes, Ward 1 convention this Saturday. If you're a Ward 1 delegate, um, attend that, and let's try to endorse Elliott quickly so we can make it over to the Audubon Festival, which is also this Saturday. Um,
True.
and if you're not in Ward 1, I would also recommend coming to the festival as well. All right. Yeah, thanks for coming, and I'll see you later this week, I guess. Yeah, this should be out either tonight or tomorrow. Just
All right.
all right.
Great.
So
Thanks so much.
thank you. All right, that was Elliott Payne, Ward 1 City Council member in the city of Minneapolis. Oh, no, that's St. Paul, Minneapolis. Thanks for watching. You can follow me on Twitter at Jason Sellers and then follow me on Instagram at MPLS Jason. Subscribe here, Jason Sellers Politics. Unless you're on Spotify, then subscribe to my YouTube, Jason Sellers Politics. And if you ever don't want to catch the video, you can just listen. Listen on your commute. That'd be great. I love the thought of somebody listening to me on their way to work. All right. Bye.